All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are with a follow up to my last lesson on it's not personal, strictly business. And this one's entitled The Talk. The Talk, if you will, you may know what I'm talking about right away, or you may not have a clue about what I'm referring to. But the talk is actually a conversation that's held on many levels at many points in a child's life between that child and his or her parents or parent. It's the talk. It's a rite of passage for some and absolute nonsense to others. So we're going to talk about the talk and explain what it really means and how it is played out, if it's adhered to and if it's not adhered to. So here we go. I'm sure you figured out now this is not talking about the birds and the bees. It's the expression that people use, Black parents in particular, when they have a conversation and they feel compelled to have this conversation with their children and teenagers about the dangers they may face because of the racism that's inherent in our society, our culture, and our nation. And this unjust racist type treatment comes in all different ways through authority figures, law enforcement, it's in the government, it's everywhere. It's in the military, it's all over the place. This talk not only tells them about the dangers of this kind of mindset that people have, some, not all, but it's a talk to help that child understand their need to de escalate the situation as much as possible. Now, if you remember my lesson that I did on it's not personal, strictly business, you will remember, hopefully, the three different laws, if you will, that were in place. Federal laws, a lot of them, state laws for sure, local and city laws, definitely. Some of these laws were written and some of them were unwritten, but most of them were written and sanctioned by government officials at some level. And these laws were the slave laws, the black laws, and the Jim Crow laws. All those shaped what's going on in our society today. Going back to slavery times and the black laws and slave laws, or codes, if you will, it was basically laws that told black people how you interact or don't interact with white people. And we're going to talk about some of these things in this lesson. But this practice of the talk goes back hundreds of years because you had to teach your kids what to do, what not to do in order to save their life. And it's still taking place today. Why pay attention to the talk? I think I started hearing about the talk when I was about 6 or 7, if I remember right, because I had an older brother who was getting the talk. So just by the very nature of being around, I heard the talk early on. When I started coming home with stories of people calling me nigger and, hostilities, me being hostile towards them because they said something I didn't like, I got the talk. When I became old enough to ride my bike around outside of the purview of my parents' vision, I got the talk. When I got into middle school, and I started playing sports and doing extracurricular activities, I got the talk. When I got my license, I got the talk and some. And as I grew older and older, you continually get different levels or different perspectives of the talk coming at you. And at this time, it's not necessarily just your parents, it's a lot of people who are giving you the talk. And believe it or not, white people give black people the talk without even knowing it by the way they behave. They may not know it, but they are confirming what they've been told when they receive the talk. Now, right here, you have these two pictures. This is Emmett Till. I talked about him in my last lesson as well. This young man lived in Chicago. He went down south to visit his family down there. His mother was kind of leery. She gave him the talk before he left. She said, don't look these people in the eye. Always be respectful. Never talk back. Don't do anything that might make them think that you are coming against them as a little black boy down in the deep south. Things were very different up north than they were down south. They weren't perfect, but they were different. Look the story up on this young man. He went from this to this. That's how he went back home in Chicago. There's a bullet hole from this side to the other side of his head. Can't even tell it's a 14-year-old boy. This young man was a 14-year-old boy who was allegedly the one who killed these two girls. 14 years old, raped them and killed them down in South Carolina. One of the youngest young men to be executed. 70 years later, he was found guilty. Louis Gossett Jr. actually did a movie that depicted this story. I forgot the name of the movie, but if you look up some of the Louis Gossett Jr.'s work, I'm sure this one will show up. Sad. This young man here was shot and killed by police. Played football, played baseball, rising star, great young man, shot and killed by police because they thought he was a threat to their lives, a little boy. Not understanding it. That was a couple of years ago. That's not ancient history. That was a couple of years ago. This young man in the middle, you see this guy here. You remember this situation down in Florida where this overzealous neighborhood watch who was legally carrying a gun himself, legally, I said, that's fine, but chose to interact with this young man to his left because he was suspicious. Go back to my last lesson about that. What are you doing in this neighborhood thing? You look suspicious. Why are you here? And so the young man ended up getting an altercation with him. I guess he got mad and upset because he couldn't beat him or whatever and shot him and killed him. Not too much longer after he was deemed innocent, this same overzealous clown was charged with taking his weapon and using it against his mother-in-law and his wife. But he got away with murder. But he was always a clown. And I bet you're wondering who this young man is to the right here. Because all these are a little far removed from me, I put somebody in there that's very close to me. He is a young man. He's one of my classmates. I grew up with this guy back home, and he was found dead in the St. Joseph River, on the banks of St. Joseph River, in an area that was previously searched, by the way. And the last people that saw him were police officers. He was a fighter. He was a boxer, and he, from what I understand, had a young lady that he was dating across the bridge. There's actually a book that talks about the half dozen or so Black men who were mysteriously murdered and dumped into the St. Joseph River, called Across the Bridge or Across the River. Check it out when you get a chance. That's my hometown. So I grew up seeing these kinds of things take place and people questioning what happened. No answers ever given. You just suck it up and move on. The racial breakdown in America, I figured it was important to bring this out. We can understand one word. The white population in America is about 61, made up of about 61% of American people. Latino Hispanics make up about 18% of America. Blacks, 13.4% of America. That's it. So not like there's a lot of us. 13.4%. We are truly a minority. And then there's 8.6 or so percent of everybody else. That would include your Asian Pacific Islanders and whatever else you want to lump in there. There was a study done beginning in 2015 and released this past July that says that 4,927 people across this nation have died at the hands of the police. Shootings. About half of those were white. So when somebody says, oh, Adrian, black people aren't the only one to get shot by police. White people get shot by police too. You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. They sure do. But I want to remind you that we only make up 13% of this nation's population. And about half of those, not half of those, I'm sorry, about 1,300 of those shootings were on black people. 900 Hispanic, and 220 from other racial groups. The word that I want to focus on here is disproportionate. The focus is not white people get shot too, because they do. You're absolutely right. Nobody should have to be unnecessarily killed at the hands of the police officers. But more so, if you look at the numbers, disproportionately impacted by the hands of our law enforcement officials. Well, you're not a law enforcement official. What do you know? We go through blah, blah, blah. I'll tell you what, buddy. I actually have served as a law enforcement official. Maybe not in the capacity as a city cop, but I did it for several years when I was in Sicily as a military policeman. I pulled my weapon 3 occasions with the intent to kill. I had to answer for every time I pulled it. So I understand the stresses of it. I understand the stresses of pulling up to a traffic accident and seeing somebody under a car bleeding to death and their head crushed with an engine block on top of it. So yeah, I get that. I get the stresses of it. We had to go through special training for our PR-24. If nobody knows what that is, that's a nightstick, the very nightsticks that Rodney King got beat with in LA. And the very first things they tell you is you do not use this, the weapon to strike anyone in the head or any place that could cause grave bodily harm or death. First thing out of their mouth. And if you do so, you're going to jail. So if you can teach a 18, 19, 20, whatever year old military person how to conduct themselves in line of duty and know the rules of engagement, not just as a military policeman, but in times of war and everything else, then you should be able to count on a person who's been on the police force 10, 15, 20, 30 years not to come out of character. Give you another story. A buddy of mine, he and I were in Okinawa together. He was from Valdosta, Georgia. And he knew that I had military police experience. So when it came time for us to retire, he went back home. He says, hey, I'm going home, I'm going to work for the police department. He says, you know, we need good black men. Why don't you come with me when you retire and I'll get you on the force? I was like, nah, man, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do something different. I said, you know, best of luck to you. We stayed in touch. And we still are in touch with each other today. He's a white male. We're in touch with each other as of today. After about 3 years, he and I talked. He said, Adrian, I can't do it no more. I said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? He said, I cannot be a cop. He said, I'm starting to find myself being overwhelmed with seeing the same crimes being conducted by the same people in the same area. He said, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm being racially divided. I got to stop. I respected that man because he quit and he got a job doing what he did in the Navy, and now he's extremely happy. But he had enough sense, enough respect for himself, enough respect for people, and even more respect for me to come out and tell me where he was honestly when he was carrying out those duties as a law enforcement official. I know not everybody can't get off the force and go do something else. I got that. But there are things that you can do to help you deal with the struggles that may make you act out of character. Disproportionately impacted. I want you to remember that. It's not that it doesn't happen to anybody else. It's just it happens to a certain group way more often than it should. That's the key. So don't up me or try to outdo me with another story. Just think about it in that aspect. Know the written and unwritten rules is what the talk is all about. What should be is not, so don't expect it to be that way. The talk basically gives us the do's and don'ts when it comes to racial etiquette in America. So those black and slave codes are still a mindset that is accepted and played out by a lot of people. What you looking at, boy? Don't look me in the eye. The whole thing about the slave codes were you do what I say, when I say, and how I say, or else. That is still being played out. George Floyd, do what I say, when I say, how I say, or else. Whether you present a threat or not, because you're not doing what I'm telling you to do, boy, your butt belongs to me. Failure to heed these commands could end your life. At a minimum, it could get you harassed, put you in prison. And like I said, these things, these mindsets take place not just on the streets of the cities that we've seen in the news lately and everywhere else, but in prisons, teachers in the school systems, and in the military. I witnessed it. I have been a victim of it. I have been to military court martials because of it, not myself, but as a character witness and as a member of the jury, if you will. Want to know more about this racial etiquette? Go to that link right there. Talks about the Jim Crow laws. It's a PDF. You can download it, share it, do whatever you want, read it. Educate yourself, people. Educate yourself. De-escalate and mitigate, the do's and don'ts. I'm going to tell you a quick scenario. Being pulled over by the police. On my way from Fayetteville, North Carolina, picking my dog up from somebody who was keeping him while I was out of town. On my way back, I was on a 65-mile-per-hour zone, and I guess I was doing a little over that. Past the state trooper, he immediately pulls out and comes behind me. I decided He ain't looking for me. So I drove about 4 or 5 miles down the road. Finally, he catches, he was already with me. Lights flashing, blaring. I pull over. He walks up. What the beep you want, man? Why you beep, beep, beep stopping me? What the beep did I do? He said, sir, you need to calm down. I am beep, 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 calm. Get out my, what do you want, Mr. Officer? And I said, well, he said, sir, you need to calm down. I'm stopping you because you were going too fast in the 65-mile zone. Beep, 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 beep. I gave him a piece of my mind. So I started to come out of my car so I could give him more of my mind. Because he had no right stopping me. I wasn't doing no more than 5 or 6 over. You ain't supposed to stop nobody unless it's 10 over, right? Ain't that the rule? You ain't got nothing better to do besides stop me for doing a couple miles over the speed limit? What the problem is? So as I was stepping out of the car, he saw that I was carrying. His partner yells out, gun. He pulls his weapon, shoots me in the chest 2 times. That's it for me. Of course, that story is not 100% accurate because I'm still here talking to you. But it did take place a couple weeks ago when I went to go get my dog down in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I was actually on that road doing a little bit over 65. I don't know exactly what I was doing. It obviously wasn't reckless driving because he would have cited me for reckless driving, which would have been anything 10 and over. I was doing about 66, 67, maybe. I don't know. As soon as I passed him, I didn't think nothing at first, but he pulls out immediately. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he's after me. So I pull over, put my blinker on, pull over, put my hazards on, roll my window down, put my hands at the 10 and 2 position on the steering wheel until he approaches my vehicle. He looks at my trunk, standard operations. I understand that. Used to do it myself. Pushes down on it, make sure it don't come open. I got that. Looks at my back seat. Got you. All about safety. Understood. Like I said, I was a law enforcement official too. So I understand what he's doing. I understand what I need to do. Plus, guess what? I got the talk. So the first words out of my mouth are, why the beep, beep, beep are you pulling me over? Because that's not de-escalation. That's not mitigating. That's causing stuff. The first words out of my mouth are, good morning, sir. Hello, sir. How are you? Well, I'm okay. I just, why are you pulling me over? He says, because you're going a little bit fast. I said, oh, okay. I said, I thought it was 65 miles on. He said, it is, but you're going a little bit fast now. I said, okay, sir. I said, well, he says, can I see your license and registration? I said, sir, with my hand still on the steering wheel. I said, my license and registration are in my wallet, which are in this backpack on my passenger side. Oh, you can reach over and get it. I said, no, sir, before I reach, I want to let you know that I am carrying right now. I am a legal gun carrier. Okay, where's it at? Midsection. Midsection, it is, Rainbow is not, round is not chambered. Roger, thank you. You may reach over. One hand off, my right hand. I reach over and I grab my wallet. I pull out my military retired ID. I pull out my gun carrying ID, and I pull out my driver's license and my insurance card. Why do you do that, Adrian? Because he needs to feel safe. I don't need to do anything that makes him feel unsafe. So I give him all that information. He looks at it, tells me, sir, I just want to warn you, slow it down for me today. I'd hate for you to not get to your destination. Where are you going, by the way? I said, sir, I'm taking my dog back to Knoxville because my brother-in-law had him up here while I was gone. Oh, nice dog. My dog's looking at him out the window like, what the heck? And so he gives me the cards back. He says, I want you to have a nice day. I said, well, you have a nice day too, sir. Thank you for your service. He's like, no, thank you for your service as well. Be blessed. You be blessed. And that's how that conversation ended. Because I got the talk and I knew the do's and the don'ts. And I didn't act like an idiot. Now, some folks, unfortunately, will say, you was set out. Oh, Uncle Tom, you had to do that kissing that man butt, blah, blah, blah. No, I did what I needed to do in order to mitigate the situation so that I could go home. Not in a body bag, but in that car. And I look at that kind of situation and I can almost assess it as the same thing we're dealing with when you talk about COVID. You can do everything in the books not to catch COVID, but there's always a chance that you might catch COVID. The thing is, if you do nothing to mitigate the situation, you're going to catch COVID. So if you do nothing to mitigate the situation or de-escalate the circumstance between you and that law enforcement official, then you are asking for something to happen. Do what you got to do. Because like I said earlier, what should be is not, so don't expect it to be. There's no 100% guarantee that nothing's going to happen to you if you follow the do's and don'ts rules. But you certainly mitigate a great deal. And you certainly put on the representation that you are not a threat. You're not being smart, telling somebody what their rights are, and blah, blah. Nobody cares about your rights if you haven't noticed that lately. So keep that in mind. And I'll leave you with that, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, keep it real, keep it relevant, keep it real relevant. God bless.